agnostic would be a non-theist. A theological non-cognitivist who
Darth,
says
are
that
you
the very
atheist?
no,
What?
yeah,
You're
I'm
so
no, I'm
new
not
here.
I'm not an atheist. I'm a fundamentalist Christian. So not I don't have a problem with the term non-theism if somebody comes along and say I'm a non-theist, because then I can say, okay, that's an umbrella term. Within the umbrella category of being a non-theist, do you deny God's existence? Do you claim to suspend judgment? Do you take the verificationist approach that the word God doesn't mean anything unless it can be verified by our senses, right? And so, Christopher Hitchens tried this crap in his debate with William Lane Craig. And William Lane Craig, who there are things I admire about him, things that I am disgusted with, but he is philosophically astute. He says he nailed him. He goes, "You seem to be using the word atheism as a kind of theism, non-theism. So which one of these positions do you stake out?" And you see on Discord and on these places, we don't have people who have moral scruples. We don't have atheists who are very thoughtful about their position. They're sloppy, and they think they're good debaters because they debate like they're at the cafeteria table. The bottom line is this: it is stupid to define atheism as merely and simply lacking a belief, because now it makes it indistinguishable from the agnostic position or the claim, right? And therefore, you're left, with your pants hanging down around your ankles when you don't have a single word that designates those who deny God.
Can you
Okay?
assign a probability to the likelihood of God?
No, because God's existence would be necessary, not probabilistic. That would be a category error.
Okay.
Okay? God's existence when people say, well, I'm not going to say that God doesn't exist, but it's the utmost probability that he doesn't. This is a category error.
But
Okay.
can you separate that from like your opinion about I strongly agree with you about the real estate of the word atheism. Like that should not be like switched up and bait and switched and Mott and Baileyed. But it's different from like you have philosophical opinions about different things
Unless
that are not.
unless these people are stupid, they're being malevolent. They're deliberately bastardizing the definition in order to insulate themselves from having to defend what their real position is.
Well,
Okay?
I'm not gonna psychologize them like that. You might very
Oh,
well.
no, 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 no. I'm not psychologizing them or doing a quote unquote armchair psychoanalysis. I've dealt with these people, probably one to 2,000 of them, maybe not 2,000, but well over 1,000 of them over 13 years. I know how these people think and how they talk. Okay. These are not sharp people. And those of them who are smart or even educated, they're being malevolent in the sense that they're abusing the English language. Atheist is somebody who denies the existence of God. Now, if somebody says no, no, it means lack of belief, saying okay, fine, but now what you're doing is you're either giving a proprietary definition to atheism, or you're citing a couple of dictionaries that include it as a third definition, a lack of belief, but that's ambiguous. It's not informative to say you lack belief. Okay?
I mean, I can kind of see that maybe they're wrong. Maybe they have a
No. Look,
misunderstanding about it.
no, there's no misunderstanding about this. 98 to 99% of people who refuse in these type of interactions to acknowledge that atheism is a proposition that denies the existence of God, they're doing so purposely because they don't have the cuyones, they don't have the intellectual confidence to defend the falsity of God.
Right, like
That's
saying
funny.
that
Okay?
they want. saying
I
that they
don't
have
find
zero
myself
confidence.
strongly agreeing with Darth that often, but I do think this is about cowardice, and it's
It
probably
it
not about.
is,
It's not about right
but
or
Right.
wrongness. It's more
but
about
don't
cowardice.
it is a form of cowardice, but don't confuse their cowardice with their demeanor, because their demeanor can be belligerent, okay? Even though they're cowards, because they can't actually defend the falsity of God.
Yeah, but Darth, you know that's like everyone. You know, Christian like demeanor is not totally dissimilar from atheist demeanor.
It depends on the person, honestly.
Of course it does. Of course it.
Unimaginable number of man hours have been a complete waste of time bickering over this should be an open and shut case. An atheist is somebody who says there are no gods. A theist is somebody who affirms that there are one or more gods. An agnostic is somebody who claims to suspend judgment. Now, whether or not the agnostic claim is actually legitimate upon inspection is a completely different issue. Okay?
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
This might be the most legitimate gripe. I might even get behind
Well,
this strongly.
I beat the tom toms on this all the time because I'm dealing with either village idiot atheists or atheists that are disingenuous.
No,
Okay?
you've probably beat the tom toms on this ever since I've ever heard you, and I probably didn't pay strong attention until now. And maybe I'll feel different tomorrow. I'll have to think about
Yeah.
it, but I think you might be right.
Okay. So the point is, if you're gonna call yourself an atheist, then you have to stand by that you're holding to the falsity of God. You know what? If you can't philosophically defend it, say, yeah, I believe that God doesn't exist, but I really don't think I can successfully argue for that. I can respect that position, right? But
Okay.
stop calling yourself an atheist. I don't mean you, but I'm just saying these
Oh
atheists
no.
out there. Stop calling yourself an atheist, and then defining atheism, co-opting agnosticism. And what really is a burr under my saddle. They go, "I'm an agnostic atheist." I mean, this is colossally stupid. Because then, if atheism is simply a suspension of judgment, and agnosticism is suspension of judgment, then calling yourself an agnostic atheist is redundant.
It might be totally redundant, but there is a new definition floating around that's totally wrong that says Gnosticism is the 100% confidence in something. Agnosticism is the
No,
opposite, and then there's
That's
theism.
yeah, that's
no,
like not even
no.
biblically
You
relevant
don't,
already.
don't,
Historically relevant
don't,
already.
don't conflate knowledge with certitude. Okay? Because
Okay.
nobody's claiming to be omniscient. Therefore, whatever knowledge states that we have, okay, we're going to have varying degrees of certitude. And a lot of people conflate these issues. We have belief states, okay?
Yeah.
Now, within the circle of all of our belief states, there's a subset of belief states for which we have greater warrant and justification for, and we call those belief states knowledge. But nobody is claiming knowledge in that they're omniscient. So the difference between knowledge and belief is a fine line and typically just a matter of emphasis. Now, that doesn't mean I'm opposed to the demarcation, right? And that we could talk about knowledge being a justified true belief. Because on one spectrum, we'll say knowledge is a justified true belief, and on the other spectrum, a belief would be just you have a positive mental attitude without justification. But rarely do people believe things for which they, from their perspective, don't have any warrant or justification for it. Therefore, the difference between belief and knowledge, practically speaking, is simply a matter of emphasis. Okay? And so this
I,
idea of agnostic atheism it's either colossally stupid or it's deceitful.
Was it popularized by Bart Ehrman, or it was that predate him?
No, 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 no. Um there were people going back even into the late 19th century, early 20th century who I've seen citations where people would talk like that, but they were very rare. Okay, only toward you move toward the middle and the latter part of the 20th century that you had more people talking this way because they realized that when people became a little bit more philosophically sophisticated, they realized they couldn't defend the falsity of God. So that's
Right.
why we have this little game of bastardizing definitions.
Yeah, but you know, ultimately, even if I agree, and even if you prevailed on this definition, like there are other issues that will
There's
present
nothing
as being
controversial about atheism being there are no gods. Look,
yeah.
if you
There
don't
shouldn't
want
be. I agree with you.
if somebody does not want to affirm that there are no gods, then fine, call yourself an agnostic. And then I can battle with you about the legitimacy of claiming to suspend judgment. But at least you're going to be more consistent and you're not going to be bastardizing a standard word.
Like, I'll be honest with you. Like, I wish there was a country that was like the Soviet Union. Not in. I'm not even talking about economically. Like, but and they would probably use the word atheist. But what did they really do? They would just ridicule a belief in God. They didn't like stand for. I have a
No, you
hardcore
don't. You don't
argument
want to.
against.
You don't want to be in a country because do you think that the people who committed the mass murders in the 20th century who were atheists, do you think they were thinking God was looking over their shoulders? No.
I'm, I'm not very knowledgeable about that. I assume that the mass murders and famines came from a pre-existing state of affairs that caused the
No.
community,
No.
not the
Okay.
other way
Okay.
around.
Gizmo. Hitler was an atheist, if not a
I thought it was
pantheist.
yeah,
Okay.
pantheist.
Okay.
I don't know what he was.
Martin Bormann, his personal secretary, said that Hitler was an atheist. Now, if somebody wants to dispute that, fine. But any references to God was simply for the purposes of public consumption
I believe
until
that.
he could
I'm not gonna
retain them.
dispute anything.
Now, Stalin, who killed tens of millions of people, was an
Stalin was
atheist.
terrible.
Mao Zedong was a rabid atheist. He killed probably 65 million people. Pol Pot was an atheist in Cambodia. Ho
French,
Chi
French.
Minh, Ho Chi Minh was an atheist. I think Ceausescu was an atheist. The point is this: there have been people who have been rulers who believed in God who have killed other people. We're not disputing that. What we're saying is that in the annals of history, when we look at those people who held absolute political power and who did not believe in God, killed, produced more dead bodies than anybody else in history. You don't want people running your government who are godless.
Also,
That
the
seems
French
like
Revolution.
it seems like really simplified metrics as far as getting at the causality of things.
Because then everything is relative. Okay?
It's a historical fact
That's a
that
deeper argument.
um, humanist humanist societies are like the most oppressive and brutal. It's just a fact of history because they don't affirm
So
God.
yeah. So this is why I have a short fuse when I get these schmucks coming in there going, atheism is just a lack of belief. This is stupidity.
Like a lot of the brutality that gets blamed on religion. Like, did you know that the Pope tried to end the Spanish Inquisition, and then the King of Spain like tried to blackmail the Pope so he could continue it? So a lot of like things that get ascribed to religion are actually it's like the secular state doing these brutal things.
I learned that there was a
So
pope who got
the
blamed
point
for a lot of Holocaust stuff who
so
actually tried to intervene. I didn't know about
well
that prior.
the point is this: people are atheists because they don't want there to be a God, not because they have robust rationales for the falsity of God. It's that
But you're
simple.
you're you're influenced by special revelation on that, right? Like that's hard to find in
No,
natural revelation.
no. Listen, okay. Um, Human beings are universally infected with sin. Okay, sin is not just doing things wrong; it is a mindset. All right, it's a mindset where one thinks of themselves as autonomous. Um, to one degree or another, and it clouds our thinking. Right
Darth, can I ask you a
now,
question?
you
Can
just
you
hold on one second. What I'm trying to explain to you is that people who don't believe in God automatically or by default reject the notion that they're on the run from God and that they're practitioners of resistant non-belief.
I
They
openly
convince
accept that label.
they okay. So the point is
Opposition
this.
to God, I accept it.
Now, the most atheists think of themselves as being practitioners of non-resistant unbelief. Okay, that they would believe if they had sufficient evidentiary or support or demonstrability, right?
Right.
But we can show that this is a phony criterion on their part because when they deploy it like a parachute, they instantly abandon that criterion like somebody pulls, the pin on their parachute harness,
I
releasing
agree with your
themselves from
point
the
on this. I
parachute.
agree with
Okay,
you on this.
that because there are two worldviews, the God world and the not God world. When they say I want evidentiary support for God, the God world, they don't have evidentiary support for the not God world. And when you confront them with this, they just become deceptive and evasive. So the
Well,
point is this.
you
The
get into
point is,
deep issues on those issues,
well,
though, right?
there's two things. The one is that I lay out that there is no rational, definitive grounds that God does not exist. And number two, which means the atheist doesn't have rational grounds. And number
That's
two,
fair. That's
the
probably fair.
atheist who denies God's existence, who embraces the not God world, is embracing this model of reality in instantaneous violation of the criterion of belief that he uses to dismiss the God world. So the atheist position is incoherent on two fronts.
Maybe I'd have to think about that. I mean, you can sell me on that. Go ahead.
Well, if I ask you to succinctly tell me in one sentence why you don't believe in God, what would you say?
I at this moment, what comes to mind is that I thought you presented a false dichotomy
I
between.
didn't hear an answer to my question. If you could give me a single sentence explication, you don't believe in God because
I'm just role
I
playing, right?
I
Because
could give
I
I
already said
could give
I
an
don't have a
answer.
proof against God.
I could give an answer
okay.
to that.
You see, you're still not answering the question. Go ahead, Joe.
So, personally, I'm not an atheist, but the answer I would say is it doesn't matter whether God exists or not.
Okay. Well, to
That's not
say that,
answering the question.
yeah, that's just
Okay,
stupid.
okay.
You just said,
No,
okay.
what I mean by that is the
No,
world where
Well,
God exists
no,
and the
no,
world
you're
where
not
God
understanding.
doesn't exist could look the same from the inside.
You're not okay. This is a very naive analysis that you're giving, and I'm going to try to
Well, Darth,
show you. Go
before you
ahead, Perry.
continue, Joe, you said you're not an atheist. What are you?
I believe in God, but I think the way I define it isn't the typical
Okay,
definition.
Joe. Okay, Joe. So the problem with what you said is it sounds good. It's a good soundbite, but when we probe it, it internally collapses, and here's why. So in the God world, okay, we can only put the God world on the table, so to speak, if and only if God, as the eternal, takes the initiative and he reveals himself in a rationally undeniable way through creation and through human history. Okay?
Yes,
Now,
yes.
A big claim.
short of that scenario, there is no God to speak of. Okay? Now, so in the God world, what we have is what we call the creator creature distinction. We can only put the creator creature distinction on the table, okay, if and only if the creator in the creator creature distinction reveals himself in a rationally undeniable way. Now, it doesn't follow from that everyone will believe, because God can reveal himself in a rationally undeniable way, at the same time permitting people to irrationally do deny him. Okay? So that's
Okay.
called the creator creature distinction. Now, within the creator creature distinction, God is the ultimate starting point metaphysically. He is the singular concrete ground of all being, and it is the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God that institutes and secures every instance of what is, can be, and cannot be. Now, alternatively to that is the not creator creature distinction. In such a world, there's no world to speak of rationally, because there will not be anything identifiable and defensible that institutes any instance of what is and what cannot be. And so you are making a classic mistake that somebody says when you say it makes no difference, because in a God world and not God world, we could have the same parameters. In the God world, we can come into contact with the ontological realities because they derive from and are sustained by the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God. So we have real things that we come into contact with, but they are only real because they are imposed by the God who is and the God who reveals himself. When you reject that scenario and you try to make some type of equivalence to the not God world, there is no realness to speak of.
Sure, and
Because
I
first,
believe.
let me finish.
Sure.
Because what you, in order to understand the incoherence and unintelligibility, the absurdity of the not God realm, that there's no equivalency whatsoever to the God realm, is you have to understand that it is the mind of God that is, who then imposes the realness of any condition. When that is set aside in the not God world, you cannot speak intelligibly of anything, because there is nothing that is identifiable and defensible that is in and of itself absolute, non-derivative, non-dependent, that then imposes what anything is.
This gets real complex real quick.
Now, when you go around and you look at the dog on the running across your front lawn, you see the wind blowing through the leaves and you see the bird flying in the sky, you think that you can think reasonably and intelligibly about your world, that the world could be the same without God. No, it wouldn't be, because then nothing would be identifiable that dictates what anything is. But then the
Nothing is a
retort,
strong word.
but then the retort's going to come in. They'll say, "Oh, but don't you understand? There could be something that is dictating what anything is in terms of its actuality,
What something
right?"
is.
They, but what they're saying is there could be something other than God. But here's the problem, okay? Is because you're invoking something that is unidentified and it's not defensible.
You didn't
So
even have to jump to other than God.
there's no thing to speak of as a hypothetical.
Could
Okay,
I
because
respond to that?
but there is no response because
Well, I think I
either
have
you
one.
no that well I know you do, but the point is either you understood the scenario that I laid out for you or you didn't understand it. If you understood it, what you will realize is this, that there could not be an equivalence of actuality and intelligibility in either worldview. There can only be actuality and intelligibility in the God world. Why? Because that which is the ground of all being that imposes what is actual and its intelligibility reveals himself. When you reject that, then there is no fundamental parameter to identify. Therefore, when you talk about blueness or dogness or treeness,
Or
there's
honesty.
nothing there's nothing that dictates in your world that anything is. You know, when you go to movies, okay, we've all been there where you go to movies, we have science fiction or fantasy movies where something just dematerializes before somebody's eyes and what they thought was real was simply an illusion. Okay? Now, there is no way to ontologically and epistemically speak about the realness of anything unless you have background information of what is absolute that institutes the realness of things. So, in a not God world, you have no background information as to what, if anything, makes anything real. Secondarily, you lose your ability to talk about whether there's one thing or there's many things. You forfeit your ability to talk about things being unified or being within classes or categories of things because there's nothing that imposes that. So when you talk about that there's three or four things in existence in a not God world, as opposed to one thing, it wouldn't matter whether you just said there's one thing or there's many things. There would be no way for you to ground that there's either one thing or many things. There would be no way for you to ground that anything is unified or that there are classes or categories of things. Okay?
Okay, that's fine. And I just have, I mean, I have one quick response. It's not even going against what you said. It's just, do you think it is even possible to have a world or a universe without God?
No.
No.
That's fine. Then
No,
that makes
no,
sense
no,
then.
and I will tell you this
Quick and easy
because
question.
because possibility is not how shall I put this to you? Um
Necessity.
Trying how do I explain this to you? Naked possibility would just simply be a world of chance where God doesn't exist. Okay? So a worldview, okay, is not how should I put this? Because I don't want to confuse the issue with what we call possible worlds, because that's a different subject. Okay. The the ground of being that is or is not something that is within the domain or the category of possibility. Okay. Now, when people hear that, some knuckle dragging atheists will misrepresent what I'm saying. Okay. The ground of being is what dictates what's possible. Possibility doesn't dictate what is the ground of being. Do you understand?
Sure, and that's one of the best arguments I've
It's
heard
it's
for
in
God.
it's in it's not a coherent thing to talk about God possibly existing or not possibly existing. I'm
Right.
perfectly willing. I'm perfectly willing to use phraseology like that in a thought experiment. Okay. But when the rubber meets the road, okay, the God's existence is not a possibility in the sense that it's a contingency. Like right now, it's possible that there's a deer in my backyard. All right?
Hmm.
Possible that there's not. Because there is some other parameters or a fundamental parameter that dictates what's possible. Okay? So because there's a backyard and there are deer in my town, it's possible there could be a deer in my backyard or not. But when you try to use the term possibility meaning contingency, with God you're making a category error.
Right, right. No, no, that actually makes sense. I think when people say possibility, they mean they themselves personally have low confidence in the idea
Eh,
of God.
When somebody says to me, "Well, you know, it's possible we're in a world without God." And my response to that, and yeah, it's possible that there are miniature chimpanzees,
It's an
about a
absurdity.
dozen of them in your colon, pulling strings on your brains, making you think that.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so if we're going to play this game, that whatever we want to imagine as a figment of our imagination, say, well, you know, it's possible, then good. Then there's monkeys in your colon pulling strings, making you think the way you do.
No, yeah, the argument that convinced
And
me of
but if
God
I said
is the
that,
fine
but you
tuning,
see, now listen, now to the person who says it's possible we're in a world without God, would they accept that it's the possibility that there are miniature chimpanzees in their colon pulling strings, making them think the way they do?
Right, no,
Would
they
they
wouldn't.
would they countenance that? They would just say, "No, that's an absurdity." Say, "Welcome to the club." To say it's
Right.
possible that God doesn't exist, you fall into the abyss of absurdity, because now, see, when we're talking about God, we're not just talking about God as a hypothetical creator and sustainer. We're talking about God existing and necessarily revealing himself in a rationally undeniable way. If we depict God in any other way, then there's no God to speak of. So
Mm,
God,
that sounds like
when
too strong a claim.
what's too strong?
Well, I mean, suppose you had a mildly deceptive God who had good reasons. You think you can't reason about God at that point?
Okay. I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and the light is going to go on in your head, and you're going to go,
That could happen. That's
"Oh,
fair.
okay."
That could
Oh,
happen.
no, it's not. It's not. Could happen. It will happen.
Oh,
Could
based.
you can you would you be able to know that God exists in a world where God purposed not to be known?
But I already think I have incomplete knowledge, so
You
no.
you didn't. Okay, I want a clear answer. Could you
No.
know that
No,
God
the answer is
exists?
no.
Right. Okay. So the point is this: either you're in a world where God is, and He has purposed and instantiated that he exists in a rationally undeniable way, or not.
True.
Okay, in that first scenario, we're talking
Mhm.
about a God who is perfect. Okay,
Well, wait, in the first scenario, you have to run that by me. I had them
listen,
confused.
when we're talking about God, we're talking about God who not just has, omni properties. We're talking about a God who is perfect, without defect,
I
without
don't pay attention
shortcoming.
to omni properties or
Okay,
philosobabble.
okay, listen. Well, it's not philosobabble. The
That's
point is this, okay? If you don't acknowledge that God is, and that he is by virtue that he has revealed himself in a rationally undeniable way, then there is no invoking God at all, because it will be no more substantive than just an arbitrary declaration.
And
And
just to
you
clarify,
and hold on a second, and you yourself just acknowledged you could not know of God's existence unless God takes the initiative to reveal himself.
did
Okay?
I claim that? Because that doesn't sound accurate.
Okay, well
Maybe
then we'll
you could
go over it
know
again.
even if you didn't
Okay,
take the
okay,
initiative.
explain to me. Okay, so in a world where God purposes not to be known,
Well, if he
how
purposed not to be known
can you
and
not
he's all
interrupt me,
powerful,
please?
go on.
In a world where God purposes not to be known, by what means could you know him?
I took that to be a different scenario. You make a good point.
Okay, so the point is the only viable and worthwhile invocation of God is where God reveals himself in a rationally undeniable way.
And in
Now,
an
if
honest way. Is that
if
important to you?
no, in a rationally undeniable way. Now,
Okay.
if somebody says that they can rationally deny the existence of God, then they shoot themselves in the head with a sawed-off shotgun philosophically, because then there is no identifiable, defensible, singular starting point or ground of being to invoke anything, including what constitutes the rational. You see, in the opposing worldview of the Christian God, he's constitutive of being the rational. He then creates a world which reflects himself, that is rational, and he places you and I in it, and he makes us to be like him, and he beguts us to possess, to a certain degree, rationality. Okay?
Makes sense.
Now, now, if you reject that scenario, then you have no scenario where rationality can be grounded. You have a scenario where there's nothing to speak of. Because if you tell me that you can speak of the dog barking on the front lawn or the sky being blue in a world without God existing and revealing himself, then I want to know what it is that is identifiable and defensible that dictates the realness of whatever you invoke.
It's a good question, and I wonder, is the first cause argument and the fine tuning argument good arguments for theism?
Yes and no.
Okay.
They are problematic when they are not properly formulated to represent God's rationally undeniable revelation of himself through creation and through human history.
Oh, Darth, you probably have no use for the fine tuning argument. That's not an argument you
No,
run.
no, 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 no.
Really?
The fine tuning are, if somebody is going to reason probabilistically, it can be very powerful.
Okay.
However, it is faulty when we are referring to the order of the creation. You can present the fine tuning argument, you can formulate it in a way that it's revelatory of God and by his purpose to us. That's why the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God. Okay?
Is
The
that Old
heavens,
Testament or New
the,
Testament?
that's Psalm 19.
Okay.
So when it talks about the heaven, or Romans 1, it says, ever since the beginning of the creation of the world, God's eternal powers have been clearly seen, his divine nature been clearly seen through everything that is made. This is referring to the world, and all of its organization and complexity is indicative of God. So the fine tuning rationale, if it is formulated properly as
Mm-hmm.
an aspect of God's act of revelation of himself to us, then it has merit.
Yeah,
But
I think I see where you're coming from.
if the fine-tuning argument is presented in the vacuum, uh, disconnected or disassociated with God's rationally undeniable revelation of himself, then it will ultimately fail.
It's just ultimately a
Although,
problem at that point.
or, but you see, you have to understand though that it can persuade people who are not sophisticated enough, or
And
that
might even call
they're
themselves
what
Christian.
sometimes apologists will appeal to things like fine tuning, which I have done in the past, and we are appealing to aspects of God's revelation, but we're not being clear about that to ourselves and to others.
Mhm.
The problem is not an appeal to evidences. The problem is the appeal to evidences where the evidences are not revelatory of God and by his purpose.
Hmm.
That's why I asked the question when people want to give various arguments as powerful. Look, how about the kalam? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe had it began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. Now, isn't it true that everything that begins has a cause? Well, yeah, biblically is true, but where'd you get that universal from apart from the revelation of God?
Right, the first cause,
No, you're
the
not
creator.
understanding.
Oh, oh.
When you say everything that begins to exist has a cause, somebody like William Lane Craig, who has a great deal of expertise in defending the Kalam, okay, he will say that the first premise is to be reckoned to be universally true because it's more plausibly true than its denial. That's ultimately faulty. You see, when you're dealing with human beings who disbelieve in God, not because the world does not overwhelmingly and clearly reveal God, is that they experience that the world reveals God, but because of their sinful disposition, they don't want to acknowledge that the world reveals God. So
You are
what they
so
do,
influenced by Romans 1.
well, that's the word of God.
Well, maybe it was
Well,
corrupted.
and you know what? You are so influenced by your false belief of autonomy, and you have been corrupted by your false belief of autonomy.
I reject God. Like, you're welcome
Okay,
to
well
that revelation.
here's the here's the problem, okay? Your denial of God will either be rational or irrational. So which is it?
Fair. Oh, I would certainly hope is rational, but we don't
I'm
know.
wait I'm waiting. What is the rational basis that there is no God?
Oh, come on, Darth. I don't have that. I've stated
Well,
this.
but you see, you want to sit there and say um, that I could be mistaken. But you see, you can only say such a statement out of the presupposition of the belief that your mind is autonomous, or as we would say, the supremacy of the human mind. The
No, no,
human
no. I'm
mind,
listening to you. I'm listening to you
listen
carefully.
carefully, listen carefully. Right now, at this moment, if you believe that God is not, then you believe in the supremacy of the human mind.
That
And
might
the
be the
reason
case.
why, no, it's not might the case, it's necessarily the
You know
case.
what? It's necessarily the case. You're 100% right.
Now,
Go on.
listen carefully. Now, the only way that somebody can reject the existence of God putatively, right, is they have to reject. When they reject that God is, they're rejecting that the mind of God is supreme. Okay?
I'm
So,
listening, but I'm
so,
suspicious that
so
you're just quoting
I'm,
Paul.
no, I'm not quoting Paul right now. Okay? Now, when I refer to the mind of God as being supreme, I'm referring to it being supreme ontologically and epistemically. Okay? Now,
Okay.
when you do not accept that God is, you are rejecting the supremacy of the divine mind. You are rejecting the ontological supremacy of the divine mind and the epistemic supremacy of the divine mind.
Okay.
Consequently and instantaneously, you are embracing the supremacy of the human mind. Now, you are
Maybe.
embracing the supremacy of the human mind epistemically, but you're not embracing the ontological supremacy of the human mind because if you thought that the human mind was supreme ontologically, then you would think you're God, but you don't.
Yeah, I think
So
you're
the
right about that.
but here's the problem, okay? So when you hold to the epistemic supremacy of your mind, that is a de facto denial of the supremacy of the divine mind. So what we have here is an antithesis. We have a true dichotomy. We have a conflict
Mhm.
between the supremacy of the
Skeptical.
divine mind versus the supremacy of the human mind. Now, when you raise doubt as to the actuality or the legitimacy of the supremacy of the divine mind, as you did
Hmm.
a few minutes ago,
Sure.
okay, that boomerang comes and comes flying around and smacks you in the head because the same critique will apply to the supremacy of the human mind. What is it that is identifiable and defensible that grounds the supremacy, the actuality of the human mind? What is it? What is it fundamentally that dictates what anything is? And don't say reality or nature, because that's no answer at all.
Right, like it could
I,
all be an
I
illusion if
stick
there's
to
no God.
absurdity. I'm uncomfortable with
No,
that.
you're not you're
I
you're
would.
not you're not understanding. You see, if in the God world, in the Christian worldview, where the divine mind is supreme, okay, we reason because we are gifted that reason by God, who is the first knower and the first reasoner. Okay? So we only reason derivatively because it's gifted to us by the ground of being, which is constitutive of being rational. When you reject that scenario, then what is your environment? What is it that what is the realm that you are in that produces the rational? What is it? What are you going to say? Evolution?
We're not guaranteed to produce the rational.
You're not understanding the very principled criterion that you use to dismiss the actuality and the supremacy of the divine mind, you instantly violate when you invoke directly or indirectly the actuality and the supremacy of the human mind. Listen to me.
I'm listening.
Do you remember?
Untapped about
Did
soon.
you ever see The Dark Knight?
The Christian Bale,
Yeah.
I loved it.
Do you remember the scene when the Joker approaches all the gangsters at the table
Oh, that
and they
was
now
insane.
threaten to kill
Missile?
him? And you remember when he opens up his jacket and he's got all those hand grenades?
How are you a Christian but you know all these good films?
Because I've watched it. It's a good movie.
I'm just messing with you.
So do
I
you
love
remember
you.
when he opened up his jacket and then he had his thumb? He had his thumb on a piece of fishing line to the pin on a hand
On
grenade.
a grenade? I kind of
Right.
remember that.
Okay. And so basically what he was threatening to do was to take all of them out. But if he
Okay.
did that, what would have been the consequence?
He dies.
He would have taken himself out as well.
Fair.
Okay? Now, analogously, when you lay out a criterion that you use to lay waste to the God world, okay, that will vitiate or nullify the God world. You're
Mhm.
like the Joker pulling the pin. You take yourself out as well, because now there is no identifiable realm to place yourself as a mind in, because then what dictates what anything is? And your answer is, well, I don't know.
I
But then
think we're
there's
at the good. I think we're at the sweet spot in the conversation where you raise an important issue that I need to think about.
no, what I'm saying to you is, there's an article, there's a chapter in the book Reason and Revelation by Scott Oliphant called The Irrationality of Unbelief. When you reject that God is and that he has revealed himself in an utterly rationally undeniable way,
Mm-hmm.
your only alternative, okay, is to come up with a make believe world that does not exist. But you see, the problem is that, talk is cheap, that even though somebody may attempt to explain the actuality and intelligibility of their world without God, they are now saying that there is not a singular, concrete ultimacy that's a mind whose mind, purpose, and plan is dictating the actuality and realness of any states of affairs. Fine, then you are telling me then that states of affairs, whatever they may be, exist in the same or similar way world, but God is just surgically removed. Fine, then you tell me now what dictates what's rational in the world. How
What,
does
but
the not rational become the rational in such a scenario?
how does the not God world prevail in this scenario?
No, how does the not rational become eventually the rational? What dictates that?
Experience,
Now, no,
knowledge.
no. You're not. Please, you're not
Joe, you're
understanding
just
the
saying
scenario.
words.
Okay,
Listen,
Place
let
your
me say
words,
it.
what
Joe.
what what the unbeliever will do is, because they've been brainwashed into the garbage theory of evolution, is to think that complexity will arise out of chaos, and
What
that
about the
eventually,
scientific theory? I mean, the
Joe,
scientific
Joe,
method.
Joe, Joe,
Sorry,
Joe,
sorry, sorry,
please, you
sorry,
don't
sorry.
know what you're talking about. Just listen, please. Okay. The point is this: when you say God's not good enough to believe in, you are, either by explicitly or by implication, saying that you can get along fine in talking about yourself or other things without reference to God. But you're taking yourself out with that hand grenade, because now there is no fundamental or ultimate reference point or starting point for you to explain what anything is. Conversely, in the God world, it is the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God that dictates that there's one other thing other than himself in creation. It is the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God that dictates that there's a plurality of things, and that there are classes, categories, and unity and continuity among the things in the world because of his plan. When you reject that, you're going to have to explain you're going to have to identify and defend what imposes the realness of any discrete state. And the light comes on in your head right now, and you go, I don't know. Therefore, you have no grounds to say 2 plus 2 equals 4. You have no grounds to talk about I-ness or you-ness, okay? Because if you're going to talk about, well, I see, I think, well, then you're talking about individuation. Is there something that imposes individuation? That there is manyness as opposed to oneness?
Physical
Is
space.
no, no. Do you understand that you? It would be analogous to somebody jumping off of the cruise ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean because he's angry at the captain for what he thought was the captain being rude to him, and he says, "Screw you! I'm going to swim back to the shore of North Carolina. Okay.
I am the captain now.
No, but you see, it's a hopeless endeavor. Once you deny that God, you're not just denying that God is, because the only God that we deny is the God who is, who reveals himself. Okay? We're not just saying, oh, we need God, just to make sense of things. We're talking about the only God that we're going to refer to is the God who reveals himself. Okay? If you reject that, then the very criterion that you are using to dismiss God as the ground of all being, then you have some explaining to do.
Sure.
On what ultimate metaphysical basis, other than the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God, what is it that imposes what is? What is
Do,
it?
do you want anyone to answer this?
It can't be answered.
Oh, okay. So it's just okay. Got it.
Joe,
I mean,
you should try it. Why not? Give
yeah.
it a shot.
No, because what they will do is people say stupid crap like reality or nature or energy. None of these are
Yeah, Joe, don't say
non-answers.
any of that dumb shit.
Okay. I'm not gonna say that dumb shit. I'm not an atheist. Um, but I can imagine a
Then
world where
no,
the
no,
God that reveals
I
itself.
Darth, you
imagine
gotta give him
I
rope to hang
imagine that there
himself.
I imagine that there are chimpanzees, miniature chimpanzees in your colon pulling strings and making you think the way you
Okay,
do.
okay,
Darth,
okay.
you,
Stop.
you know
Don't say
Joe's
that, please,
young. Give him a
dude.
chance. Let him
Dude,
try.
Listen to me, stop right there. All you're simply doing is you are appealing to your imagination when you give God the double middle fingers. Do you
I'm
realize
not
that's what you're
personally
doing?
giving God. I'm
You're
not
you're
personally
not you're
giving
not
God double
understanding.
middle
You're
fingers.
not understand. Are you a Christian, Joe?
No, I mean I
Okay,
believe
well,
in.
Joe,
You're a
listen
god
to me.
believer.
Then there's no God for you to put on the table. Then
Why does the
And
God that can I please say one thing? Why does the God that reveals itself that clearly exists, why does it need to be the Christian God? Why can't it be another God?
number one,
Good
because the
question.
God of Christianity is the only God that exists. Number two,
It's overhyped.
that God has revealed to us in a rationally undeniable way through creation, through the prophet, ultimately in the person of Jesus Christ, that he exists exclusively and indispensably. In other words, you cannot do without his composite attribute set. So, for example, we could test the claim that somebody says that oxygen is neither exclusive nor indispensable to keeping them alive. So we'll put them in a hyperbaric chamber and we'll
Mhm.
remove the oxygen from the room and we'll see what happens to them, right?
Right.
Now, the God of the Bible, when we look at the testimony in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, we're talking about a composite message, not just one soundbite here and there. Talking about an overall composite message from Genesis to Revelation. God says that he has revealed himself in a rationally undeniable way through creation, and he has revealed himself through the prophets cumulatively, culminating in the person of Jesus Christ, death, burial, and resurrection as the Savior of the world, and that his character set, his composite character set, is exclusive, meaning he's the only one who exists that has that set. Any other scenario doesn't exist. And that character set, that composite attribute set of the God of the Bible, his attribute set is indispensable. In other words, you cannot do without it. And part of that character set is that he reveals that he is there. Okay? Now, if you claim that the triune God, okay, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, as the triune God, you will either accept or you will not accept that he is and that he is exclusive and indispensable. If you do not accept God's revelation of himself, as I have explained it to you, and I can further elaborate, okay, I'm only just giving you a composite breakdown.
No, it
If
made
you
sense.
reject God's revelation of himself as being exclusive and indispensable, analogous to the person who denies oxygen is exclusive and indispensable when we remove the air, the moment you begin to speak about your world, if you so much say my shoelaces are untied, or ice cream tastes good when it's cold, or the sky is blue, there is nothing within your model that is identifiable and defensible that dictates the actuality that anything is actual.
And that's why God's a good foundation. But why
No,
does it
no,
have
no,
to be the
not.
triune God?
I just were you not listening in the
No,
last
I
3 minutes?
actually were. I
I
were.
just explained to you. Well,
I was listening to you.
why does it have to be oxygen that keeps me alive? Because it's
How life
exclusive. Because it's
exists.
exclusive and indispensable. I just explained to you
Yeah.
that the God of the Bible's attribute set. Okay, he has a composite attribute set which he has revealed to us in the scripture, and he communicates that that attribute set is indispensable. Why? Because he's the only creator. There is no other God. There are no other gods. There is no other
That's a claim.
creator. That's right. Now, the
Can
point
you
is this.
prove the other
Well,
gods don't exist?
Darth is aware
yeah,
that's a claim.
listen to me. The
Okay.
proof that other gods don't exist will be in the self-attesting revelation that the God of the Bible is the only true God.
Oh boy.
And due to the impossibility of its denial. In other words, do you know
Impossible.
what a reductio ad absurdum is, Joe?
No, I don't. I don't know what that is.
A reductio ad absurdum
When
is
you
laying out a
assume one thing
proposition.
and you end up with
A
a
and when
resulting
you
conclusion.
when you deny the proposition, it results in either a contradiction or utter absurdity. So the point is this: we prove that any other worldview other than the Christian worldview, we show it's false by showing that the Christian worldview is true. Now, when you do not accept that presentation, okay, you immediately are plunged into the abyss where there is no proof, there is no reason, there is no truth, there is no up or
Hmm.
down.
I'm not sure.
There is no
Okay,
God. Did you
okay,
mention that?
Joe, listen carefully, okay?
No, that was Gizmo. Joe
Listen
has
to
been
me.
silent.
Listen to me. The proof that there are no other gods is because there can only be proof for things if and only if the Christian God exists and he reveals himself. Now, if you reject that and you say, well, I don't accept that the Christian God has done it, then you are instantly operating from another worldview and you're talking about the realness of your mind, your reason, proof, adjudication. What makes any of those things real?
Um, I don't even quite reject your.
Hold on, I got to change my
Okay.
headset.
You sound really non-committal, Joe.
I think it's because Darth is very convincing, and I think I'm
Yeah.
changing my
He's
mind.
got a
So
he's got a certain Irish style persuasiveness about him.
it's
But
very
you can resist
persuasive.
that.
Well, here's the thing. So like, I was for context really quickly while he's changing his headset.
All right,
I
I'm
was
back. I'm back. I'm
okay.
back.
Hey.
Okay, listen, I'm
Welcome
back.
back.
Listen. Really simple. Okay. The proof that God is in his revelation, okay, of himself. You will either accept or you will not accept his revelation. If you do not accept his revelation, then you are denying his revelation. But here's the problem. Then you're in a quagmire where you don't have the capacity to affirm or deny anything rationally. Everything you will say, the moment you reject God's revelation, will be a world of pure arbitrariness.
Okay, and Darth, you are convincing me. I just want to make that clear. I'm not denying these things. I'm just questioning them,
No,
and
okay.
it's very persuasive.
You're missing the point.
You're missing the point. If
Okay.
you do not accept, look, God reveals, okay,
Mhm.
God reveals that he is, and he reveals what he is like to us through natural and special revelation, okay? If you do not accept for whatever mental or verbal
Accept,
rationale,
affirm it as true. If you do not affirm the
yeah,
Christian
yeah,
worldview as true,
yeah, yeah,
Got
yeah.
it. Got it.
If you do not accept that it is ontologically real, okay, the non-acceptance will either be an explicit or an implicit denial. But affirmation and denial has
well, before you move on,
to
Darth, do you get that point? Non-acceptance of the Christian worldview entails that you deny it. There's
that's
no middle
correct.
ground. There's
Yeah,
no state
yeah.
where you're not
If
denying
Okay.
you
it, but
don't,
also
Got
not
it.
affirming it.
it,
You're
Got it.
elite.
Okay.
if
Okay.
you
So
listen to
I
me, if
deny.
you do
I
not
deny.
listen,
Okay.
listen, if you do not accept, and by the way, it doesn't matter if you don't agree with me. Where you don't have the luxury of disagreeing with is that I'm accurately representing what the Bible says about itself. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the God of the Bible communicates very clearly from Genesis to Revelation about his nature. Okay?
That's correct.
Now, now he reveals certain things about himself. And you say, well, how do you prove that? Well, the point is, in order to prove something, you're going to have to fall back onto some propositional standard. And God himself and his revelation is that ultimate standard of which anything that is accepted to be true will have to rely on. Now, if somebody says, well, that's begging the question, well, then guess what? Then what you're saying is that there is not a singular proposition from which all other propositions derive and depend, wherein that proposition is self-authenticating and self-attesting in and of itself without extraneous confirmation. The point is this: God's revelation of himself is such, it is self-attesting and self-authenticating because of its source and because its own internal testimony about itself is such that it would therefore be impossible to rationally deny God's revelation of himself and his character and attribute set.
To rationally not accept would be a
Right.
more precise way to
So
say it.
the point is this: deny God's self-revelation, and you would be pulling the pin on the grenade like the Joker. You won't just be annihilating those around you, you will be annihilating yourself. Because now when you say, I have no need of God, I don't believe that God
Another way to
exists.
put it, before you move on, another way to put it is that to be rational, you must accept God's revelation. You must accept
Right.
Christianity.
Now,
Okay.
that God is, and that he is the ground. In theology, God is referred to as the principium ascendia, meaning the ground of all being, and the principium cognoscentia, the ground of all knowledge, or the
I believe.
root of all knowledge. Now,
I'm kind
here's
of
the
leaning
Yeah.
problem,
that.
okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
The moment you have any level of a grasp of God's various stages of revelation, when you reject that, okay,
Non-acceptance
you
is rejection.
right. You will now fall into a realm of nothing. There's nothing to speak of. If you tell me, oh, I don't believe in God, and there's a basketball in the driveway, and I say, good, explains to me, what is it, since it is not the mind of God through his plan, purpose, and actions that institutes that there can be driveways and basketballs and blue skies, what makes basketballs and blue skies real?
What secures and institutes the ground of all being?
That's a category error.
Did I phrase it wrong? What
No,
happened?
that you're saying what contingently provides for a non-contingent being. I mean, that's incoherent.
Oh,
The
I didn't
ground
think
of
of it
all
that.
being, the ground of all being by definition would have to be self-contained, absolute within itself, and unconditionally non-dependent and non-derivative.
It
That
exists
Whenever I
because
hear
of
you say
its.
the ground of all being, I take that to mean God. Am I wrong?
the ground of being, it's what we're referring to typically singularly, but at times some people may think there's a plurality of things
Okay,
as to what dictates all instances of what is and what cannot be.
sure.
Now, in the Christian
We
worldview,
hold that the ground of all being is God, but you
yeah,
could conceptually imagine something else.
yeah, some people think that there's
Okay.
a plurality of energy states or fields out there that interact, and then you have the emergence of particles and matter and all that kind of crap. But the bottom line here is this: this is a higher level of thinking,
I'm
okay?
listening.
And your usual village idiot, this will fall on deaf ears. But the point is, this is an irrefutable testimony. This is ironclad. The
Mhm.
reason why somebody will not accept what I have presented, that that I'm recapitulating the Christian worldview, is
Mhm.
not because what I am not saying um, isn't self-attesting. It's because the hearer
Is
is
in rebellion to God and
is in a
wishes not to
state
be
of
judged.
alienation from God, and the
Got it.
only way, listen to me, the only way that we can get, look, let me put it this way. If you go from belief, if you go from unbelief to belief in God as you see it, okay?
Yeah.
Mhm.
What you cannot disagree with me on is this, that if you go from unbelief to belief, the only way that you could rationally believe is if and only if God has revealed himself in a rationally undeniable way. And if you go from unbelief to belief and you now accept that God has revealed himself in a rationally undeniable way, that therefore entails that the previous state of unbelief was not a state of rational incredulity, but was a state of rebellion.
Okay. I'm probably
Now,
not in the
the
right.
only
Okay.
the
Go
only
on.
way to the only way to get through to somebody like yourself and others who is compromised ethically by your own sinful disposition, but because you're so accustomed to your sinful disposition, it seems normal to you, not abnormal. So the only way to get through to somebody like you who is actively suppressing the truth is to show
Number
you that
one.
the very position that you are staking out in lieu of accepting God's revelation, that position is utterly irrational
Irrefutable and
by your own.
undeniable.
Listen carefully. If you do not accept that God has revealed himself, as I have detailed, the only way I can get through to you is to show you that the moment you stake out that position, it's completely incoherent from top to bottom, from left to right. And I can just simply point and say, okay, your position is God is not needed. Good. Tell me what is needed.
Darth, our end game is that we're friendly adversaries. You're never going to convince
No,
me.
your end game is this. You continue to be in rebellion against God.
True.
right? And you want to know something? You are a ticking time bomb, and everyone else is. See
Oh,
what you fail,
bullshit.
what you refuse to accept and acknowledge is that
Okay.
right this very second, you are under the complete wrath of God, but that the only reason why it's not being executed this very second is because God is merciful, waiting for you to repent. But his patience will run out with you because he has put a limit to the amount of moments that he will allow you to give him the double middle fingers. And
I
that
will
limit,
gladly
and
fight
that, and
God.
that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that limit is your lifespan, which is a vapor.
Yeah, it's a speck in the grand scheme. We all die.
Good. And you want to know
Well,
something?
I'd like to know.
And
I'm
You
not
just
whistling
said that
past the graveyard,
you,
Darth.
you just said
but,
Darth is never going to convince you. Is that because you have rational grounds that God does not exist,
no, there is no
or is
rational
that
ground.
because you're
Okay,
in
listen,
rebellion?
listen. Do you know who Steve Jobs was?
Died in 2011.
Right. Steve Jobs was considered somewhat of a genius. Okay.
A guru.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember.
Now he got pancreatic cancer. Okay. Now
Hmm. He was a fruitarian.
he decided that he was going to pursue alternative means of dealing with his pancreatic cancer. There are many people who believe, and it could be debated, but I think there's good reason to believe that
Hmm.
had he pursued an aggressive form of therapy, he could have survived or at least lived longer. When he actually died, okay, he was probably aware in his dying days when he looked like a skeleton that he was in this condition because he foolishly didn't seek out um, what were the prevailing methods of dealing with the cancer. Now, that doesn't mean that he would have been cured,
Could be.
right? But the point
Yeah.
is, there's very good reason. The point that the analogy that I'm bringing up here is this.
Hmm.
Okay, God says that not only are you a fool when you deny Him and you continue in rebellion, God says, how shall I put this?
God says
That's not
you
a
don't even
pejorative.
believe.
Let me put it this way.
Fool isn't a pejorative, by the way. It's a
No, no,
description that you don't have
yeah.
grounds for anything you say.
Yeah,
Not only
Romans
does
1
God say
says
you're in a
you don't
state of
even believe.
listen to me. Not only does God say that you're a fool to whatever degree that you deny him, but God makes
Hmm.
it very clear. The moment that you do that, he imposes a temporal judgment upon you, okay, as opposed to the eternal judgment which is coming. The temporal
Sure.
judgment in this world is that God says their foolish hearts were darkened. In other words, when you look at this passage and other parallel passages, the darkening of the mind, the person who's experiencing it, becomes self deceived. They don't realize that in their foolish state, when they deny what God makes absolutely obvious because they don't want God to exist, okay? They're darkened, okay? Now,
Hmm. I'm
have you
listening.
okay,
I have a lot of opinions.
when at nighttime or when you're in a dark enclosure, right? Your eyes start to adjust and adapt to the lower light conditions. And sometimes we become so accustomed or acclimated to our the realm that we're encapsulated by, okay, that it just becomes second nature. Only until we're exposed to the opposing realm do we realize that we were in darkness. Okay.
I was
Now the
raised
point is
Christian.
this. The point is this, okay? When
Joe,
you
you're having
rebel, when you rebel against God, okay, you initially realize you're rebelling against God, but then as you persist in your God denialism, typically when you're young, right? God imposes a kind of darkness on you. But you see, you're so accustomed to it, you don't realize that your darkness is irrational thinking. You think it's perfectly rational, but it's not rational. Okay? The bottom line is this: to deny
Listen,
God's existence is utterly irrational. It's completely irrational. It is insane. And the reason why it's insane is because God would have to exist and have a specific character set and create a world wherein the world could be rationally appropriated and we are imbued with the ability to affirm and deny certain things.
I think
So
it's
you
interesting
see,
that
God would
you
have
admit
to
all that.
exist in order for you to even have the capacity to affirm and deny things. If you reject what I just said, then you're going to have to explain how affirmation and denial are possible in a not God world.
Well, I could affirm what you said conditionally, just like
No, no,
you
no. Listen to
originally
me. When
stated.
I say affirm and deny, I'm not talking about just simply a verbal affirmation and denial. I mean, when you affirm and deny something, you're going to instantiate that. You see, only in a world where the world emanates from God's mind, it's instituted and it is sustained and secured according to his mind, his purpose, and his plan. We then are endowed with having some rationality and the ability to affirm and deny certain things. When you say, I deny God, you're saying, I have no need of God. Okay, fine. Then explain to me, you just affirmed and denied something. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Yeah,
affirmation
go
and
ahead.
denial. So listen, every positive statement can be reformulated into a negative statement. Okay? Now,
Fair.
if you're going to affirm or deny anything, and you
Mm-hmm.
say, and you deny God, what you're actually
Mm-hmm.
communicating is, I can deny things in a world without God. That's what you're claiming. So explain to me,
This is the
how do
crux
you
of the argument. You are at the heart of the argument.
how do you deny something in a world without God? Go, do it.
I all I can say is that you're at the heart of the
You
argument.
did you didn't answer my question. In a
I
world
was being
without God,
evasive.
where the mind of listen to me, in a world where God is, where the mind of God dictates what is and cannot be, and thereby we
Mm-hmm.
then have a background in an ontological background for affirmation and denial. When I say affirmation denial, I don't mean mere verbal affirmation denial. I mean instantiate the affirmation denial. How in a
I get
world where there's nothing identifiable or defensible which fundamentally dictates what is or cannot be, how do you affirm or deny anything? How do you do that?
And how do you know God is being honest?
You're not
That
answering my
these are all
question.
arguments that
What you're
compound
doing
up.
is, listen to me. What you're doing right now is because your prime directive, to use a Star Trek metaphor,
Go
your
on.
prime directive right now, as you stand before God right now, your prime directive right now is not to repent of your false belief of your
I
autonomy.
repent
So when
0%.
when I ask you these questions and I ask other unbelievers these
Mhm.
questions, what
Sure.
do you guys do? What you just did is what happens all the time. It's
Don't lump me
dodge,
in with
dodge. The proof of the pudding, the proof of the pudding that what I'm saying is absolutely true is that
Mhm.
when I ask you to support your alternative scenario, you just dodge. Only somebody who knows they're giving God the double middle fingers, okay, will dodge. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, and I expect you to answer the question.
All
On
right.
what ontological
Give me a pause.
basis,
Give me a break. Give me a pause.
ontological basis can you
Mhm.
instantiate any affirmation and denial in a world without the world being originating and governed by the mind and plan of God?
That was super confusing.
On what ontological basis do you affirm or deny anything?
I have no
Because
non-absurd.
your position is you do not need God. Now, you are
Point.
claiming to possess the capacity to affirm and deny some things without reference to God. Now,
Correct.
explain to me, what is the ontological metaphysical basis to affirm or deny anything?
Pragmatism. It works for me.
No, no, stop right there. Pragmatism is, you're begging the question that things work. What dictates regularity?
Um, I I suppose you'd have to undergo something
No, no,
happened
don't
over
give
and
me
over.
I don't want you to give me a suppose. I want you
Yeah,
to
not a
give me a
hypothetical.
I want you to identify and defend what is it that dictates that any regularity is and is real. What dictates that?
Consistency.
That sounds like a bad
That's one of the stupidest answers I've ever heard.
Look, Darth, I'm gonna be honest.
Consistency
This is
just
a
means
tricky question.
repetition.
You might have me cornered here. I mean,
No,
I'm
it's not
not.
that I have you. It's not how I cornered. God has already laid waste to you. In First Corinthians, it says, "Has not God shown that?
I
Where is the
reject
wise
all
man?
that.
Where is the debater of this age? Has not God turned the wisdom of the world into foolishness?" Your position is utterly foolishness because
Wait,
you
Darth,
claim
are you
not.
listening to yourself? You're
You
like the
claim
wisdom of the
not to
wise is
He's
need
not listening to you,
foolish.
God.
brother.
That's your
You
position.
claim. You
The
claim not
wisdom
to
of the
need
wise
God.
is foolish.
Listen to me, Gizmo. You're claiming not to need God. Now, prove it.
Yeah, I don't need God. I mean, it's
Okay.
self-referential.
Is that an arbitrary declaration?
I'm if I'm the arbiter because you've called upon me, then
What is the ontological basis that you don't need God?
There is none.
I don't know his
That's
favorite
begging the
color.
question.
I've never met him. He
Okay,
does
okay,
not
we're
sustain
done.
me.
Now
But
listen, now you're
having
listen to
never
me.
met him, he
Okay,
clearly
listen to
doesn't
me.
sustain me.
Stop, because I'm gonna get pissed. What you just said is a 13-year-old answer. It is not, you did not verbally instantiate your not God ontology. You just simply just say, "Oh, I'm unconvinced that God exists." Did you answer my question? No, you did
I didn't stutter.
not. What you did do was you responded to my question with an invocation of incredulity, of just saying, "Oh, I'm unconvinced of God." You didn't give me an explication of your not God ontology, did you?
My explication is I plead ignorance, and you've long known
No, no,
that.
no. You're not understanding. Okay, you're not understanding. You claim that you need a reason in order to believe in God as creator and the ground of being. What is
Well,
your
let me clarify
reason?
that.
Okay, listen, stop. No. What is your reason to believe that there is any identifiable ontology that provides for reason? What's your reason to
No,
believe that?
I want to clarify that. I want to set the record straight.
If
I
you
do
don't
not
answer
claim
the
to.
question, I'm going to server mute you. What is your reason ontologically to believe that there is something that imposes the capacity of reason? What is it?
What is my reason for thinking there is a
Have a
necessity for
nice day.
something
You're
that
done. You see, this is the depravity of the human heart because people are so addicted, like a heroin addict, just like Hunter Biden is addicted to his crack pipe. The sinner, the unbeliever, is addicted to their rebellion against God, and they're willing to embrace it in a death hug, knowing that they're on the precipice of eternal damnation. And rather than repent, what they want to do is they just want to continue to fool themselves and say, oh, that's hellfire and brimstone. There is no God. When I use your own criterion that you use to dismiss God, and then I apply that criterion to the realm in which you claim to exist and think and reason, you instantly violate that criterion. And then when I ask you, good, what is the realm out of which you're speaking? What is it ontologically that makes anything what it is, since it is not the mind and the purpose and the plan of God? And all you have are verbal dodges. Only somebody who was sinful and did not want to repent would respond in that manner. The only way we can get through to you when your hearts are darkened, when you're in rebellion against God, the only way to get through to you is we just can't appeal to the cold hard facts because your mind is darkened as to the facts. I have to show you that the very ground that you claim to stand on, there's no ground. You claim you have no need of God. And when I ask you, say, good, explain to me why you have no need of God. What fundamentally dictates what anything is in your world, since it is not the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God and the God who reveals himself